touchdowns. I really can. I think Doug Peterson has really got some trust in Carson Wentz, and he's not afraid to cut it loose. Detroit hasn't stopped anybody. I'm not going to preach that you have to have Carson Wentz on your team, but I bet you he's not going to be outside of 15% owned.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad play. It's not a bad play at all.
So I like Wentz and Carr. After that, I think if you got to take somebody, you want to spend big money on your quarterback, you go right at Aaron Rodgers. I do think that is a primetime game. Is that a Sunday night game?
I believe so. Yeah, it's not in the choices for the main.
I'm gonna look that up. It is the Sunday night at 8:30 game. So if you're doing that, if you're including Sundays throughout, then and Aaron Rodgers would be your high play. But I love Aaron Rodgers at home on national television because Aaron Rodgers likes to be at home on national television. He's always comfortable in those positions. That's why he's made such a name for himself as he does it under the big spotlights. And I like Rodgers, but I wouldn't spend $9,100 on him unless you get a real dirt cheap lineup around. So let's jump into. We're tearing through the time here, so let's jump into to wide receivers and then the tight ends and call it.
All right, wide receivers for me, we can go real cheap. Outside of the obvious, Antonio Brown's a stud, and obviously A.J. Green's a stud. Those are the two high-value guys I would like.
Can you afford to not have them?
Yes, you can. You can this week, I think. But we'll see, obviously. Who I really like and I think is going to get similar numbers, maybe not yardage, but touchdowns, if he's healthy, we mentioned him earlier, is Julian Edelman. I think, again, obviously for Tom Brady to go off, he always makes a statement. I think Edelman will play. Obviously, I think we mentioned the injury report shenanigans. Mm-hmm. So I think and he's $7,000 on FanDuel. I think that's a real good value. And obviously, if you want to start Tom Brady, you have to start. You have to put in Edelman in one of your lineups. So I like him. Also, for pretty cheap, $7,600, I like Brandon Marshall this week. I think Pittsburgh gives a lot of yardage up on the ground.
I'm scared to death of that. I'm scared to death of Ryan Fitzpatrick in that Jets offense.
Well, yeah, I am too, and that's why I wouldn't pick. But you still see Brandon Marshall is getting his numbers, and so that
he is. He had a nice week last week.
Pittsburgh has given up over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns so far. So I know that you can throw on them. And given up that, if you saw the excerpts on ESPN, he's going to go down if he was in a boat with his quarterback.
Yeah, he is. You wanted him back. He got him back.
His quarterback is going to feed him, and you're going to see offense this week. You're not going to see that 20-17 game.
Yeah, so what? That's an alert point with Brandon Marshall that, I'm sure Ryan Fitzpatrick gave him a pat on the back and said, hey, man, thank you. Thank you for not tossing me out of the bus and saying,
and you got to put him for it because he certainly could.
He certainly could.
Remember,
that's a class move from Brandon Marshall. That's a team move from Brandon Marshall. But that's what I expect from Brandon Marshall because he's that guy. That's a great.
And another thing is he's not on any injury report. He was last week, so
he's clean.
He's healthy.
Okay.
He's had 22 targets in the last 2 games.
Sure.
So he's got the last 3 games. He's got over 200 yards in the last 3 games. Excuse me.
He's going to get his work.
He's due for another touchdown. So I just feel like it's not a bad play, and he has value. I also like Jordan Matthews. We talked about that earlier with your pick. That would
and that was we're going to mesh our receiver discussion together for the sake of time here. But, I'm with you on the Jordan Matthews play. I like Carson Wentz enough to think that Matthews is his number one target. He's going to be very, very interesting as the season goes forward to see what they can do. So I like Jordan Matthews a lot. And he's inexpensive, too.
Exactly. And then another guy, since we're talking about, we've put in some expensive players now. I like Dontrell Inman, $6,100. It's going to be a shootout. He had 11 targets, caught 7 of them, 120 yards and a touchdown. Again, I'm a little leery because San Diego doesn't have an established pattern of who they like to go to. But I think they found their guy. And like I was reading, this is Phillip Rivers' new toy. He's going to have to throw somebody. So I can't see Dontrell Inman suddenly falling off the radar. It just doesn't.
Yeah, he 5 of 11. 5 of 11 targets for 120 yards and a touchdown last week. That's against the Saints. That's against a team that you can toss the ball all over the field on. I'm not crazy about anybody that David Amerson is covering. Again, Raider honk coming forward, but Amerson has played really well. I don't know who he'll be on. He may be on Tyrell Williams, who looked, by the way, I watched some of the Charger game last week. He looked lost.
Okay, yeah, I didn't get to see
Tyrell Williams did not look as aware as he needed to. 5 of 8 targets, 40 yards. And you're not running against a Saints defense that's got brilliant coverage. You're just not. And Tyrell Williams struggled. So, yeah, Inman has become their number one. Travis Benjamin's all of a sudden got a problem holding on to the football.
Well, keep in mind, too, the Saints defense, they did pretty well against Atlanta as far as focusing and what I would call shutting down Julio Jones.
Well, they did, but keep in mind, Julio Jones was hurt that night.
Right. Okay.
He was on the injury report, which these guys are hurt every night, but he was on the injury report. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't. But everybody else has been able to toss and chuck it all over New Orleans. I'm staying away from those wide receivers in San Diego. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No. Like I said, I like the value and the production that he had. Also, again, just based upon, I think Trevor Siemian is going to play. I'm not afraid of Emmanuel Sanders again this week.
Yeah, that's a nice play. It really is.
He's on a roll. Again, I don't know what to expect. That could be because I think Atlanta's defense is a little bit underrated. They can play. You can put points on them, but they can also man up and stop you.
Sure.
So I think we could have a low-scoring game as far as FanDuel fantasy is concerned.
I think Trevor Siemian is just not a guy who's lighting up the sky for the Broncos. So eventually, that whole thing is I don't think it's going to run out. I think he's a game manager kind of player. But
no, and that's why I like Emmanuel Sanders because he's the more possession receiver. That's why I'm not confident with Demaryius Thomas.
Yeah,
so that's exactly what you said. Trevor Siemian's his bread and butter has to be getting Emmanuel Sanders the ball. And
he's been good at it so far.
To get open. So
I
like
good at it thus far. He's laid the ball in there nicely. How about, and I got to speed us along here because we are getting up against the clock, but how about guys like Bryce Butler in Dallas?
Possible. I don't think that
that's a tough matchup this week with Cincinnati, so maybe it's not the best suggestion. I wouldn't plug him in against Cincinnati this week. I just wouldn't.
Yeah, no, well, I know Des Bryant isn't going to play most likely, so.
He's not, but that's not the 49ers secondary. That's the Bengals. They're a much better team.
Right.
I would not.
I expect Dallas to hit a roadblock all the way around this week.
Very quiet, very cheap FanDuel sleeper. I love Chris Hogan this week in New England.
I think
any possibility that Edelman is banged up, you play Chris Hogan. He's going to fall right into that role. If not, Danny Amendola will steal it all and we'll all throw up all over our laps.
And keep in mind that, I don't expect Julian Edelman to have 3 or 4 touchdowns, but I expect Tom Brady to have 4 touchdowns. So who's catching the other 2?
And he spreads it around.
So you would be surprised how many lineups have won in the past on a prolific team where you have the number 1 wide receiver, the secondary wide receiver, which, again, it's a toss-up and it's a gamble with Hogan or Amendola. But you wouldn't have a bad lineup to even have Edelman, Hogan, and possibly Martellus Bennett in your tight end spot.
Yeah, that's a lot of Patriots. But I mean, you are a believer that this is going to be a 42-10 kind of ball game. And by all accounts, it probably should be.
Think back to the prolific offenses of past. There's certainly cause because we know Gronk's not going to be Gronk this week. So I can expect, because we know that Brady relies on his tight ends, that Bennett could have
expectation is too high.
But if
you're going to stack one team, you're going to stack the Patriots this week against Cleveland. The expectations are too high for me to jump on board. I want to throw one more wide receiver at you. I've watched Crabtree. I've watched Amari Cooper. Crabtree's clearly the more trusted receiver there, but I think this might be one of those weeks to sneak Amari Cooper in there. But he's holding his value at 7,200. He's not dropping despite his numbers being pretty pathetic the last couple weeks. Just not an exciting player at this point. He will be. He should be. He might not be though. 7,200 might be a little too high, but you just mentioned Emmanuel Sanders at 7,100. We both agreed on a Jordan Matthews in Philadelphia at 7,000 and Edelman at 7,000 as well. But is there any potential to find a guy like you need a dirt cheap player? Steve Smith's jumping out at me at 6,300. I think you're crazy for not plugging Steve Smith in a lineup against the Redskins.
Well, you're seeing what he's done. We know we've established that he's their guy.
He is. He's their guy. He's a good player. I don't mind if, and I'm just kind of pointing out a couple cheap options that we actually have only a couple minutes, so we got to jump into tight ends. But guys like Tavon Austin, if you want to spend dirt cheap numbers on a receiver just so you can plug something else in and fit in a guy who may pop one, he's got a bad quarterback. He's not the best receiver in the world anyway. But this is a guy who a team like Buffalo, who's really aggressive, traveling cross country, can overrun some plays defensively, and Tavon Austin could probably pop one this week. And I'd like to mark my words, but we're recording this, so it's happening.
Brian Quick has had the last couple of weeks. He's been that guy. So
he had 2 weeks in a row. Brian Quick's had a big touchdown.
Yeah, and they use their players in that manner too. Another guy might be Travis Benjamin out of San Diego for that very same reason.
Could very well be. And as you get lesser and lesser, guys like Sammy Coates in Pittsburgh, don't overlook these guys that are in the 5,000 bracket. They could pay off big time because a guy like Sammy Coates, he may turn around and have 4 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. That's a nice day for $5,300. That's a real big day. So don't overlook some of these players. We got to jump into tight ends because we talk too much, but it is a radio show, so it's okay.
Sure.
Fire away, tight ends. On the
right. Covered Martellus Bennett for the obvious.
Yep.
Like I said, Brady's got to throw him to somebody this week, and I think he could go off. Zach Miller, he's questionable, but again for the same reason, Brian Hoyer. Mm-hmm. Zach Miller is going to have to come and show up, and they got to get him the ball. He scored in the last couple of weeks, so I like him. And then our buddy Kyle Rudolph, again, he's showing himself. Why?
He is.
Why, until you see otherwise, why wouldn't you?
Dude, we all owe Sam Bradford a major apology, too.
Yeah, man, what a good quarterback he really is.
Yeah, he is beyond satisfactory. He is a guy that a lot of teams out there that don't have quarterbacks would love to have.
Yeah, the guy that I like that, so those are our staples that we've really seen that Jordan Reed is the guy you probably want to have this week, although Baltimore's not giving up too much as far as...
You do. Baltimore didn't give up a whole lot to tight ends recently, but you got to like Jordan Reed because he's just he's an impact player. He makes a difference on the field. But you're gonna crack a pretty big nut on a Sunday for him at 7,800.
Exactly. So the cheap guy that I really like is Zach Ertz. I
think it's a good call.
Yeah, they really like to utilize the tight end in Philly, and Carson Wentz is connected with him before Ertz was hurt. And so him coming back from the injury, it's one of those things that I expect him to kind of force on the ball a little, and I think he'll have a good game. Maybe score a touchdown and get you 12, 15 points that you need to,
But you're right. He may force the ball in there. Depending, if you watch that situation closely leading up to game time and you pay attention as best you can to see who the starting tight end for Philadelphia is this week, if by any chance you find out that it's Trey Burton, he is really worth a play.
Yeah. He is, but I think they're handing it right over to Ertz.
Yeah, you're probably right because Ertz earned that job a few times over last year.
Really can't see. There doesn't seem to be a glaring matchup on tight end, and no real tight end outside of Jordan Reed has really established himself as a dominant force this week.
Greg Olsen, but he's not available in the Sunday games.
Right, exactly.
I want to point out 2 guys that I don't want to see on anybody's starting lineups. Nobody's DFS, nobody's DraftKings, FanDuel, or Standard Leagues. Do not start Gary Barnidge. Stop.
Yeah,
starting Gary Barnidge, stop.
He had a fun year.
Yeah, it was a nice ride, kid. It's over. You're just no longer an offense that uses you, and it's not your fault. Antonio Gates is another. He's a Hall of Famer, but he is banged up. He is more hurt than they're letting on. Don't start Gates this week. Keep an eye on Zach Miller and see how